Let's speak to Bob Maginnis, who's a former senior strategist at the Pentagon and a military analyst. Bob, appreciate you being with us. You know, we are again seeing Turkey default to Russia, where the U.S. has failed its NATO ally. We saw it with the S-400s and again with the creation of this safe zone. What is the U.S. losing in all of this that Russia's gaining?
Well, there certainly is an influence issue here, and clearly influence in the Middle East. You know, the question is whether or not President Trump, who tends to be a transactional sort of guy, says, well, I'm not sure what I'm getting if I keep troops there. Now, of course, given that Turkey is a NATO ally and subject to the same treaty the United States is, that is a significant factor. And I think an influential factor in President Trump's decision to kind of remove the special operators that were along the border and, take a lot of heat from his own party, as your previous guest outlined. So this is a significant move. Yes, it will empower, I believe, Vladimir Putin after the Sochi meeting. There will be joint patrols. Clearly, Putin will have, I think, larger stature in the region because he went in and filled what is perceived as a vacuum. But hopefully this ceasefire, this pause, as President Erdogan has said, will hold, and that the YPG does move back away from the border and doesn't threaten mainland Turkey.
My program editor is telling me now that there's some breaking news coming into us now, saying that there is no need to carry out new operations in northern Syria at this stage outside of Turkey's current operation area. That's from Turkey's defense ministry. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that's good news. Obviously, President Erdogan and the Turkish military have been successful. That the YPG has withdrawn from the buffer zone sufficiently to convince them that new operations are unnecessary. And of course, with the insert of the Russians in there, there seems to be more of stability. And that's, I think, everybody's best interest is served if we don't have a continuation of hostilities on either side. And so it would appear as if that's good news from Ankara.
Where do you see congressional pressure? Again, we've seen a lot of bipartisan opposition to Trump's initial troop withdrawal from Syria. Where do you see congressional pressure and sanctions playing out on Turkey from here?
Well, if it appears as if what we just discussed continues, and that is that the hostilities are diminished significantly, then I think less congressional attention will be paid to this issue. You get it off the television and the front pages of the paper, and the congressional people are going to look more at the topic of the day, of course, is impeachment. And so I do believe that if that is the trend, then we're not going to have new sanctions imposed by Congress. Clearly, the president, through his vice president talking to President Erdogan, had an agreement. We'll take away those sanctions. We'll look at, better improved relations as we ought to as allies. And as a direct result of that, I think that Congress will begin to back down. There'll be some diehards there, but their arguments sort of pale when people start to ask, what's the national interest in supporting the Kurdish population, the YPG, in northeast Syria? And I think that they're beginning to recognize that U.S. national interests are not served, and in fact, our good ally Turkey, they have a very clear concern about refugees, reintegration in Syria, as well as the terrorist threat that comes from the YPG.
We heard from the defense secretary a bit earlier today, Mark Esper, saying that some troops may stay at 2 bases in Syria to prevent Syria from filling the vacuum from the U.S. withdrawal. What do you see the role of American troops in the region, particularly after what Iraq said about American troops being based there?
Yeah, that was somewhat disconcerting from the defense minister there in Baghdad. But the reality is that, yes, we have a vested interest in the entire region. And it's a political and geopolitical calculation on part of the administration. And Mark Esper was just saying, look, we don't want those oil facilities, those oil wells to fall into the wrong hands. And so we're going to leave an insurance policy. Now, keep in mind, 200 people or whatever number it ends up being is not a lot. However, they can call the might of the United States Air Force to bear down on any group that would contest that particular will. We typically are the 800 gorilla in the living room. And I think that all the players in the region recognize that. And, President Trump has demonstrated a willingness to do things that are a bit unorthodox, to withdraw us, to not fire against the Iranians when they shot down our drone, and, of course, to demonstrate our willingness when we really believe our national interests are at stake. So it keeps everybody off balance, but I don't think that's all that bad.
Well, Bob, really appreciate your thoughts, and thank you so much for coming on. Bob Maginnis, senior strategist, former senior strategist at the Pentagon. Thanks for that.